Good afternoon. My name is Barton Morris. This is Nick Galendez. We are lawyers at the Cannabis Legal Group at our office here in Royal Oak, Michigan. This is Cannabis Live, a show that we tape every week to discuss the issues that are related to the cannabis industry and to the work that we do in order to enlighten, inform, and educate as many people as we can. Thank you for tuning in. Today we're going to talk about how to get a city to opt in to marijuana. This is a topic that I will be presenting on at our seminar that we're going to present at the TCF Center in Detroit, otherwise known, or also, formerly known as Cobo Hall, on Friday, September 27th, next Friday. We're going to have a great seminar with Al Harrington, myself, Nick, Travis. We're going to have some tax presentations from Vinar AR. Eric Allison from Las Vegas, Nevada. He's going to talk about cannabis fundraising and capital markets. So it is going to be a great seminar, and we invite everyone to attend. You can find registration at our website, cannabis-legal-group.com. Today, as I said, we're going to discuss what I'm going to be talking about at the seminar. It's about how to get your city to opt in. As many people know, many cities in the state of Michigan have not opted into marijuana yet. Well, a couple of them have. There's 1,700 municipalities in this state, and most of them are still undecided. And that means that there's a lot of opportunity for people to get into industry, but you have to get a municipal license. You got to have that city give you a license to say that we're going to permit, or they're going to permit, a cannabis facility within their community. And so we have to get them to do something. And oftentimes we don't want to just sit around and wait. We have to do something affirmatively. We want to get out there and talk to them and get them to do something, while at the same time letting them get to know you as a potential partner in their city to operate a facility. So it's a great endeavor to do. It's something that we're engaged in quite a lot at the law firm here, and something that I think that people really need to understand. So the first thing that generally comes up is the fact that many cities have already opted out. They've already said, no, we don't want cannabis facilities within our community, and that's a point of that people of confusion. It's a point of confusion. People say, well, why do I go to a city that has already opted out to try to get them to opt in? It seems as though they've already made up their mind. And the answer to that is it's not that simple. Right, Nick? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, there's several ways you can opt in, and I think kind of to go over the different requirements for medical and for adult use, and then we can kind of go into the weeds a little bit more deeper as far as what those options are, kind of talking points for the municipality in terms of how to try to get them on board, and then just kind of having a discussion about that. So for medical licenses under the Medical Marijuana Facility Licensing Act, the state law makes these municipalities have full control over whether or not they opt in. So if they haven't opted in yet, then they've opted out. What they actually need to do is affirmatively pass an ordinance saying we allow these types of facilities, these number of facilities in our location, and then having various different structures for an application process. For the adult use law, the Michigan Regulation and Taxation of Marijuana Act, the law is a little bit different. And what we're seeing right now is about 3 different options. So the first option is the easiest. The municipality that you're in has passed a resolution or an ordinance that basically says we are not allowing these establishments within our jurisdiction. And I think for the most part, that's what we've been seeing a lot of. There's, I think, over 600, potentially more now, that have opted out and informed the state that they are not allowing them within their location. I think the second best option, or the second option for adult use, is that they've actually opted in and passed an ordinance. So on the one hand, they've either said we're not allowing them, but on the other hand, they've actually passed an ordinance and it's went through reading and finally approved, and it says we're allowing these many types and this is how you apply. I think that where the tricky part gets is when they're silent. A lot of municipalities are concerned that they have by November 1st to opt out or opt in, and that just simply isn't true. What this whole confusion really results in is basically the state will look at a list of municipalities that have opted out, and if you try to apply for an adult use license there, they're going to say we can't look at your application because the municipality where your facility is located is on this list. What that doesn't mean is that a municipality has to opt out. They can opt they can kind of be silent on the issue, but that's where it gets a little confusing because you will still need to work with them to get local approvals and permits and a certificate of occupancy and a change of use. So with adult use opting in versus out, it's a little bit more murky, and kind of that's why we're seeing the confusion going on board there. But regardless of kind of medical or adult use, you need to get in the good graces of your municipality and allow them to let you be there. And I think that's kind of what we're here talking about. We always are asked this, by clients and leads and different individuals, can you help us here and there? And what do you think, Barton? I always tell them, a lot of it is the groundwork that you do. A lot of it is them getting to know you versus them getting to know a hired hand.
Yeah, some of these clients already have a relationship with a lot of these municipalities, whether they may own a business already within that city, or they have already developed relationships with municipal officials, perhaps somebody was elected to the township board or the city council that they've known as a neighbor, and they have long-standing relationships for whatever reason. So that's one thing. You gotta utilize these things in order to make yourself known more and demonstrate that you actually care about these cities. A lot of these cities really care about themselves. You know what I mean? They're not interested in even the state of Michigan or in the policy of marijuana. They're interested in what are you going to do for us, and they're interested in also demonstrating that loyalty in order to. I think Ferndale is a good example. I think that Ferndale granted licenses. The city of Ferndale just opened up two or three dispensaries, right, in Ferndale in Oakland County, the second city to do so in Oakland County. And I think they picked the people that had already given those caregiving center licenses that they had distributed many years ago, and those people couldn't operate because of the county prosecutor and the county sheriff, and then they kind of just waited around for the opportunity to be able to do what they're doing now, and they gave those licenses to them, and they had permitted their facilities in those cities. And so those are people that had originally they identified as people that are beneficial to the city and people that have demonstrated a commitment to the city, and they stayed with those people. And I think that's a lesson that we can learn with respect to what people can do in order to indoctrinate themselves as good people to be selected, applicants to be selected for a license. Now, is it also true that many cities opted out in a fear that they would automatically opt in?
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the confusion I was getting at, where the law's a little unclear in terms of
Right.
the municipalities and the municipal officials really have their the residents' best interest in mind with this, but that definitely was a fear that a lot of this is going to get pushed, forced upon us without us having a say, and so a lot of municipalities are opting out from what we've seen as a precautionary measure, because they don't want to just have the floodgates open, even though, from what I've described, that's not actually going to happen because they do have control at the local level to prohibit these, even if they don't opt out. But I think it's, kind of an extra safety net on top of the control they are already allowed to have over the properties in their jurisdictions and who they issue permits to and give certificates of occupancy to. But it's just an extra safety net to say, for sure, state, if you ever see anybody applying here within this time period, just know that we've opted out for now. We're not allowing them. And then that still doesn't close the door permanently. As you know, there's a lot of different ways you can opt in, and I think Barton was going to discuss that next, whether that be, there's a few options that you can choose from, and definitely different ways to explore it going forward for how to get your community to opt in.
Yeah, so I think that just to close out that point, just because a city has opted out doesn't mean that they're not going to opt in. And don't think that you're wasting your time in order to talk to a city and take some action on a city that has opted out. They have probably done so because they were fearing having automatically opted in. So it doesn't mean that they're not going to do it. It doesn't mean that they're not thinking about doing it. Certainly doesn't mean that they're not going to do it. It simply just means they're not going to do it immediately. They're going to take their time in identifying what exactly to do. And that leads us to the next topic of discussion, I think, is when they do decide what they're going to do, there's a question as to whether they're going to adopt an ordinance that permits medical facilities as opposed to adult use facilities, or a combination of both. I think, as an example, the city of Berkeley right now is in the process of considering an ordinance to adopt a certain number of licenses. And I think at one point that they were going to do medical licenses. It's like 3 retail medical licenses and 3 retail adult use licenses. And I think they've changed that, and now they're perhaps only interested maybe in a combination. So a facility can have both medical and recreational. What sense does it make perhaps to have a facility that's medical like on one side of town and a recreational one on another? Why not just do both in the same facility? I mean, I think that most cities will agree that there still is a need and should be a need to service the medical community even after adult use. There's still going to, as a medical community, there's a patient population. These individuals are going to require to continue to get their medicine, and so they need a place to get it, and perhaps in a different fashion and a different tax structure as it relates to, as opposed to adult use. So, Nick, what do you think about that? Like a city, what do you think a city should do, or do you have any advice as to somebody going to the city as to how to fashion or structure the request to permit a facility, whether it be medical or recreational?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, I think that really the way that the regulators have structured the adult use licensing, knowing that those medical licensees need to be filtered in through the adult use kind of, the medical license allows them to be in the adult use license, for most of the licenses available. And the rules that say, you can have co-location, you can have equivalent licenses within the same structure. I mean, I think that really should be where the municipality kind of has more flexibility, because as you said, it doesn't make sense to say, only 3 medical licenses and only 3 adult use licenses when, what if there's 2 and then 1 separate one for medical here and 1 for adult use here? It doesn't really match up. I think it's just more consistent and efficient to have things under one house. There's only 1 location that has to be monitored versus 6. So to the extent that municipalities are able to and want to lump them all into one, they can still have certain special nuances within the same ordinance, but I think you can mostly treat adult use and medical facilities kind of as one and the same. In terms of whether or not they opt in for medical and or adult use or just adult use, I think that's kind of debatable as well. I don't see why a community would allow adult use but not medical. But at the same time, and this is something that I kind of thought of as Barton and I were preparing for this show today, was, what if there are communities out there that do want micro businesses? I think a lot of people are interested in that. And the problem with that being, we know the social equity program is going to be bringing in people from disproportionately impacted communities. We know that they've reduced the application fees for a lot of these different licenses and the initial licensure fee. But what really is kind of the elephant in the room in my mind is property values. I think property owners, not to say that they're greedy, but they realize they're sitting on a green gold mine, so to speak, and they want to sell to the highest bidder. And that isn't necessarily the micro businesses. You're going to have only 150 plants to grow, process, and sell only out of your location. So I think that fruit was reserved for the smaller businesses and Michigan residents, yet I'm kind of concerned whether or not they're going to be able to actually find a location. So going back to the whole medical, recreational, or both, I think there's some room for communities that might want to just opt into adult use, but only for micro businesses. So then you could have kind of a haven for micro businesses, for smaller businesses. Perhaps you could even, they could all come together and be an event organizer and have farmers markets or something like that, subject to the security requirements on the weekend or something. So, I know there's some municipalities who have left carve-outs in their zoning for micro businesses and smaller businesses that are able to enter the market. But I still think the property owners and how much it's going to cost to actually get a location and do the build out for your facility is really going to be a problem. So I think municipalities can get creative and say, we're only going to allow micro businesses, or let's allow both. But I think it gets a little awkward when there's one or the other, but not both at this stage. But as we've seen, a lot of municipalities To the extent the small number or small percentage allow medical, there's even a fewer percentage that allow recreational, and I think there's probably less than a dozen or two that have opted in for adult use. So there's not going to be that big of a explosion for adult use licenses or sales yet until more municipalities come on board, which I think is a problem as well, because that leads to more black market sales and health issues that we're hearing about a lot on the news today.
Yeah, and it's just another thing that I thought of, if there's not a lot of medical, so if cities are adopting only adult use, and they're perhaps not permitting like medical growers, there could be an issue if there's more, eventually, probably not anytime soon, but if there's more and more and more adult use growers and not enough medical growers, then the medical market could decrease. You know what I mean? So if a city is, let's say, contemplating adult use retail, but like micro businesses, but also medical, but then they're also going to permit only, let's say, adult use cultivation and not medical cultivation, and then there's a proliferation of that where there's just less and less and less medical cultivation because everybody, of course, is interested in adult use, then that perhaps could lead to a significant decrease in the amount of medicine available for patients.
Yeah, and that's what I think too. When we were interviewing Director Brisboe, they have that temporary time period where medical licensees are going to be able to bring over their product and designate some for adult use. But kind of what was in the rules is that it'll only be for a limited amount of time, and there's not a way for you to take the product from recreational and bring it back into medical. So I think that's another good point where you don't want to be too top heavy on one side for medical or vice versa, because then really it's all about the supply, and we want to make sure that patients and consumers have a viable option compared to the black market going forward. So I think that's another issue that will have to be addressed.
It will. I want to talk about how do we do this, right? Like, I have a personal manner in which to attack the situation. What I'm talking about is how do we get these municipalities, and particularly the municipal officials, to begin this conversation, to have this conversation with you, and to actually do what's necessary to lobby them or to get them to move forward in a positive fashion that's consistent with your goals. And first you have to understand that, and more often is the case, is that they've already had this conversation. We've been talking about medical and recreational marijuana in this state now for at least 2, maybe 3 years in these municipalities, certainly since the enactment of the Medical Marijuana Facilities Licensing Act. They've been talking about it already, and they've been talking about it in different degrees. Some cities have talked about it a lot, some cities a little, some publicly, some not publicly, some cities not at all, or municipalities not at all, cities or townships. So first, you gotta really understand what they have talked about previously in order for you to be able to even move this conversation forward, if you have an understanding of where they've been. So every city is going to be different, like I said. And a lot of times you can simply just look at their website and look at prior meeting minutes. You can search. Most municipalities have a website. In fact, I think by law, most of them are required to. And they have their meeting minutes and their agendas, and you can go on there and look. You can type in under the search query marijuana, and it'll come up with their previous minutes that they've discussed it, and you can get an idea. Actually, you can get a lot of information from that. And so I always recommend that. That's one of the first things that I do. And then one of the next things I do is I like to have a good idea of the municipality in which that I'm investigating or looking at, right? And because there's a lot of differences. Every city's different. They all have different characteristics, not only from the municipal officials themselves, but also the geographic nature of the city. Some cities have downtown areas, some don't. Some have large residential zones, some don't. Some have larger geographic areas where their city is spread out with a large piece of land. Others are very small. Some cities have a lot of industrial zones or a lot of agricultural zones, and so it's really important for somebody to try to understand a city is to really understand its geography and its topography. because this plays a lot into, and also helps you demonstrate that you know what's going on within the city and understand its population density and its population makeup and the types of people and current businesses that are in the city, even the history of the city. These are all very important things that can be learned mostly just by looking online. Even Wikipedia generally has a lot of interesting things about a city that I look at that I can use when I talk to the municipal officials, because when I do talk to them and they know that I've looked into their city and I've done some research, they appreciate that, and as they should, because when I'm talking to them, I do have a genuine interest in helping them, because if I'm only trying to help myself or I'm only trying to help my client, they're going to see that, and that's not, in my opinion, the way that you want to come about it. It's more what can we do for them, not what they can do for us. And the moment that we have that type of attitude, the more they're going to be receptible to the types of ideas and suggestions that I may have. And one other thing you're going to have to, or that you will understand very quickly, is that some people are simply pro-cannabis and many other people are not. Meaning that the moment that you begin to have a conversation with them, they'll either shut off completely or they will completely open up, or somewhere in between. And this is something that you can you get used to, but something that you can prepare for as far as what type of dialogue that you're going to have with somebody that perhaps is not pro marijuana against versus somebody who is. First of all, second of all, when you do have these conversations, they actually are a lot more easy than people may realize, because like I said, these municipal officials have had these conversations before, probably a lot of times. In fact, a municipal official in any of these jurisdictions, they get it, like phone calls, they get emails, they get people just coming up to them and saying, hey, what do you think about having a facility, a marijuana retail business on the corner of Main Street and 3rd? And they've had these conversations a lot. You'd think that perhaps they don't want to have them anymore, but that's not my experience. So the question then becomes, well, who do you go out to? And I'd say the first thing people you go out to, the people that you know. If you have a familiarity or a relationship with somebody, a municipal official, then perhaps you start there. If you don't, that's okay. All of the elected officials and the appointed officials and the people and those that are hired, they're all on the website, and you begin with just talking to them. I like to send emails a lot. Like usually all of these emails are on their website. You can send an introductory email, and many of them will respond. Take my word for it. They will respond, especially if you're a resident in that community, because if you're a resident in that community, you're also a voter. And so these people are elected officials, and they're very cognizant of the fact that if you're a voter, a constituent is going out and trying to get their attention or simply just want to have a conversation, then they're going to respond. And I don't believe they're just going to respond because they're a resident. I think they're going to respond because they have a genuine interest of being helpful and doing what's in the best interest of their municipality. And so with that in mind, reach out directly to them and say, hey, I was wondering how you feel about this, or what your plans are. Perhaps we could meet and discuss it further. Or perhaps you could be invited, or they may say, hey, you know what, we're going to discuss this already. We're going to have a meeting about this, a town hall, or some type of presentation that's going to occur. And you might find out more what's going on already. That's the point. You have to get more information. The more informed that you are, the more you're able to act upon that information in any fashion that's appropriate in order to get your plans moving forward, either off of this particular municipality and onto another one, or moving forward with this particular municipality. The city council members, planning commission members, zoning board appeals members, the city manager, city attorneys, even clerks, those that work there, all of them are sources of information. Now, each one of them may be of different degrees of openness, but there's plenty of people that are very open about what's going on, because ultimately it's not supposed to be a secret, right? This is not supposed to be, hey, by the way, let me tell you what's going on secretly. No, I think that this should be publicly available information to those who request it. The question is, how many people are requesting it? And I found not a lot of people, because they think that for whatever reason that information is not going to be shared. But in my experience, it's being shared very publicly and very openly, which is what I would expect. In fact, if there was any secrets going on, if somebody was trying to tell me a secret, then I'm almost, it could be a red flag.
Well, you see some of that happening too with some litigation going out for certain municipalities. So there's always going to be that going on. I think that, just to kind of piggyback off of what Barton was saying, all politics is local. I think really knowing what you're getting into and who you're talking to is really important. A lot of times, it's almost like Inception. You can tell someone and call and say, hey, marijuana, everyone else is allowing them. Look, you can make taxes happen and get more revenue and make things safer and eliminate the black market. But unless they really feel like it was their idea and they want to be warm to that and actually do it, it might fall on deaf ears. And I think there's a lot more connected things going on here too, because you have to think about, as Barton was saying, the types of businesses in the area. Because if there's a lot of big players that, and I'm not talking about cannabis, I'm just talking about bigger nationwide international companies, banks, anything really, any kind of industry that's much bigger than the cannabis industry that provides a lot more jobs in that community. And if enough of them, or even one of them, is more anti-cannabis, then it might not be the right way for a city to keep them on their good side. So, there's a lot of different things going on here. I think that it's easy to say, hey, here's some data from Colorado that, shows that this is helpful and this can help hit a lot of the points that the city or township is really trying to improve on by potentially allowing this in the city. But the one thing you can't do is prove a negative. So all of those different fears about crime and, statistics are there, but also with the caveat that they're very specific to that location. And so one size does not fit all. And I see where the elected officials are coming from, where, they voted or they were voted in and are representatives of the city and have the health, safety, and welfare of the residents in mind. And while a lot of the numbers and, they could tour a bunch of facilities and see that it's safe and protected and brings in money, but it's also those unknowns about, well, what if we allow it on this corner and this happens? Or, what if it doesn't turn out the way that we want it? And I think those are a lot of the fears that, big companies pulling out and taking even more jobs, we don't want to regret this in the future. One thing I can think about just that happened recently is Pontiac. They just got a contract and they just approved Amazon to create a distribution warehouse in their city. I'm not sure if Amazon knows that they're also opting in for cannabis, but I wonder if they're going to want a seat at the table. So not to say that Amazon is against it, but they might just not want them around there, or they might want the city to reduce things. So there's a lot of different things that can come into play. Airports, federal grants, a lot of different things that cities, if you're calling and just asking why a city isn't opting in, it's not a very easy answer. Well, we just don't like it. There's a lot of different things going on that they have to think and take into consideration.
We're going to continue this discussion at our seminar next Friday, September 27th at TCF Center, are cultivating a successful cannabis business in Detroit on September 27th. We're going to continue the discussion by talking about the important factors that we really need to consider and be able to illustrate to these municipalities in order to help them understand the benefits of having these types of facilities within their community. Of course, the biggest ones are economic benefits. There's significant economic benefits and probably a bunch that they perhaps haven't considered. And so it's important that anybody approaching them understand them and be able to argue them and articulate them because there are significant economic impacts. But of course, there's also social impacts as well. One in the form of reducing the black market and getting rid of the black market, or reducing it to the degree to which that is no longer available to sell to children and sell to those that it's not intended for. Because the larger the black market is, the black market doesn't discriminate. And we're going to have that conversation and discuss the importance of and the effectiveness of eliminating the black market. And of course also social equity. By providing facilities within our cities or within these cities, it promotes a significant social equity component of the industry, in that it will allow for those that have been historically disproportionately affected, and communities that have been historically but disproportionately affected. This is a great way for municipalities to be able to do something in order to make up for that disproportionate treatment. And then, I mean, there's more, tourism. There's issues about tourism. There are issues about safety. How safe are these facilities within a city, and whether it adds to less safety or more safety as far as public safety. And then, of course, property values. And then the importance of community engagement as well. The more that I am working with municipalities and I see these facilities operating, it's significantly important for them to engage the community as well. So we'll talk about that too. We're going to talk about that and all types of other topics at our seminar next week. We hope that you will join us. You can find tickets at our website, cannabis-legal-group.com, where there's a link where you can go to our event page and learn more about the event. So we hope that you join us. We thank you very much for watching, and we look forward to speaking to you again soon.